Well, a good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final round of the AROC Racing League Touring Car Championship for H2 2025. Yes, we're nearly 3 months into 2026, but we are saying goodbye to the Giuliettas for a time being, and I'm sure John Cole, as you can see there, might want to say goodbye to his Giulietta in just a minute if any more sausage curves are found. But we are in qualifying here for our final round here at the Silverstone GP circuit this time around. Think back 13 rounds ago when we started here at Silverstone, but only on the national layout. This time it's the full Grand Prix course for our drivers to negotiate. We were here last week, of course, in our GTA 1750 105 series cars. This time it's the modern front-wheel drive touring cars that are going to be navigating the miles here at Silverstone. 11 minutes, in fact maybe about 12 minutes left on the clock here in qualifying. Our last qualifying session of the season, as I say. Colin Knief currently leads the charge, 2:09.6, 9.6, sees him about a second clear of anyone else. That is the largest margin in qualifying we have seen for quite some time. That's impressive given just how close the racing has been at various points this season. Colin not quite been as present as he would have wanted to have been in the mid-season, I suspect. We are hoping to see him a little bit more as we head towards next season as well, and I'll probably dive more into next season throughout the evening's racing. But just a quick note to anyone who is thinking about taking part. Maybe you've watched along so far this season, maybe you're a former AROC Racing League driver as well. Do make sure you get registered, do make sure that you buy a ticket. This year we are doing a ticketed entry format to the championships, so that's just to help keep servers going. That's to help with the admin of the championship, to make sure we can pay for content whereabouts we need it. So do make sure that you do get your tickets signed up. If you do got any queries or questions, get in touch with myself or Andrew Whitehead as to how to do that. Even leave a comment on this broadcast. I will make sure to point you in the right direction. There's plenty of information about this on the Alfa Romeo Owners Club UK website as well. We are the sim racing section after all, so there's a proper page. There's a Facebook group as well where you can ask any questions that you might have about getting involved, and I do implore you to get involved because next season should be a very exciting one indeed. The Giro d'Italia in our Giulia GT3 cars, as well as our, shall we say, more interesting in terms of a formatting structure series as well, with the GTV and the Harpy 4C out on track as well. That'll be replacing the historic series in terms of the lineup, and the touring car series will be replaced with the GT3 running in effect. But all you need to know is every Wednesday, 8 PM, just turn up and go fast. That's the most important thing. So you will need to get registered for those championships if you haven't done so already. But let's focus on this one in what will be our final round of the 2025 running. As I say, we said goodbye to the GTA 1750 running last week, and now it's time to say goodbye to our front-wheel drive Giuliettas. Obviously, our GTV Busso-powered cars will be out next season for H1 2026, and they'll be representing the front-wheel drive chassis Alfa Romeos. With 10 minutes to go in this one, though, Colin Knief does improve with a 2:09.5, so finds another 10th there. It was already a very impressive lap. Andrew Whitehead gets closer, but just not quite close enough with a 2:10.3. That's half a second ahead of Miles Davis in this one. Miles Davis, a rookie, a newcomer to the season, to the season's running this year, and what a job he has done so far. Has been a real star for me so far this season, so hopefully he can just only build on that momentum. He's already had some events in particular where he's really shone, put on some great fights for us. So as I say, hopefully he carries that momentum into next season as well. And next season, again, I'll delve more into this perhaps in this evening's races, but also heading into next season as well, which is not too far away. That's why I say do get signed up when we've not really got a big break in between events this time around. We're just going to go head straight into the 2026 running. So heading into that 2026 running, especially in the GTV and the 4C championships, there are going to be some developments in terms of car allocations, maybe tyre allocations as well, to just level the playing field out a little bit. But as I say, we'll delve more into that later on. 8 minutes left on the clock in this one. Whitehead's the driver we're on board with at the moment. He's heading round Woodcut and down towards Copse, where we have saw a few big overtaking moves done last week. I hope we are going to see some more this week as well. Now, delving into the track itself, Silverstone, very high speed, high energy, of course, although perhaps a little bit higher speed in an open wheel car or a Formula 1 piece of machinery that you usually see navigating the Oxfordshire countryside here. But I think at least is my sense of direction let me down again. No, it is Oxfordshire, isn't it? It might not be. Is it Northamptonshire? Oh, someone please correct me. I'm sure someone's watching along who's actually got their brain switched on. Do correct me on that one. 7.5 minutes left on the clock. We're looking back at the hangar straight. But unlike the GCA 1750s, these cars have got a bit of downforce on them, and of course front-wheel drive. They might begin to cook those front tyres. We're asking a lot of the front axle on these Giuliettas, don't forget. They've got to do all the accelerating, all of the braking, a lot of the weights over the front axle on these cars, and they've got to do the steering as well. So those front tyres certainly are exercised, which could mean that as we head further into the races this evening, especially with those high-speed corners, we might see some tyre drop-off, might see some tyre degradation. Drivers are going to have to be sensible about how they want to push on with their tyres. We have just under 7 minutes left to go on the clock now, so I will say another quick welcome to everyone tuning in along with ourselves this evening. Do make sure to drop any comments who you're supporting along with, what you've enjoyed from the season so far, what have been your highlights, and what you're looking forward to as well. It's 8:20 at the moment. We have not long to go until our penultimate bit of racing action for the Giuliettas this year, and Knief still leads the charge with that provisional pole at 2:09 9.5. No one's got anywhere near that. Knief we're actually going to go on board with as he runs through Luffield in just a moment, because he's gone purple sector once again, a 34.8 through that first sector. And it looks like a nice clean run through Woodcote as well. So stamp on the loud pedal and navigate your way down towards Copse. Easier said than done, especially when we're in racing trim. But let's see what Knief can do. Ignore the predicted time in your bottom left-hand corner of your screens, folks. That's just a little bit wrong there, because I haven't been in for quite enough laps yet for this server to quite realise what's going on, at least for my car entry. So apologies for that one. Some more YouTube issues. Most of the time it's absolutely fine, but just every now and again it just likes to keep me on my toes, and then the stream doesn't seem to get picked up for whatever reason. OBS is more than happy to do it, just YouTube just doesn't seem to quite like me sometimes. Either way, to be honest, it's probably a router thing, maybe even on my end. He heads down the hangar straight, does Colin Knief, loses a little bit of time through Sector 2. Obviously, Mags Beckett is going to be the big time eater, really, if you don't quite nail it, because you've got to carry that momentum all the way down towards Sector 3, all the way into Stowe as well. So a very technical, very difficult circuit to really eke the most out of, especially over an extended period of time, especially over a long stint. But Knief certainly do a better job of it than myself. Is currently third in the championship standings, and we'll delve into those in just a moment. But first, Knief's going to come around the final corner. Through Club we go, onto the start-finish straight, and does actually improve. It was a time loss through Sector 2 and Sector 3, but that Sector 1 was so impressive, Knief's found another 10th. And there we go, it's near enough, makes no difference. 1 second between P1 and P2 in this session now. We haven't seen Matt Daly jumping in just yet. We got 5 minutes left on the clock. We could still see him. It's the Matt Daly technique, is to just jump in qualifying late on and put in a good lap. So let's see if he can do that with just a few minutes left to go. But it is going to be cut and dry, because it's a 2:10 lap here at Silverstone. There's not that much time really to get your car out on track, get it warmed up, and get it ready to go for a quick one. Now, I do apologise if I immediately delve back into calling these karts once again. I'm getting myself geared up for a weekend here at this very track, indeed, in the world of Club 100 karting here in the UK, for the maiden broadcast at the Silverstone Karting Complex. I know there was a little bit of controversy over kind of its placement at the venue, but it is kind of positioning itself as the UK's premier international karting venue. We're spoiled for choice here in the UK, obviously, for some great tracks, but I think Silverstone's really going to be that world-class facility, which, as I say, a few others are, but I think Silverstone's going to try and use its linkage as the home of the British Grand Prix to make a bit of a mark, shall we say. So looking forward to being here this weekend, but as I say, if I do call these karts, you know why now. 3 minutes left on the clock. Knief still struggling to beat, well, not I say still, is now struggling to beat that 2:09 9.4, which is perhaps unsurprising. I wouldn't be able to get near that. Very impressive time indeed. Further behind, we have got Matt Daly out on track, I'm pleased to report, so we've got no inkling of what those sectors are looking like just yet. This is his out lap. We are going to stay on board with them then, as he does have Andy Webb for company, but this will be his first fast lap coming up in just a moment, which will give me a bit of an opportunity to talk about what the championship is going to be looking like this evening then. It's technically not settled yet, this one. 40 points separate Matt Daly and Andrew Whitehead. Now, favour very much swings towards Matt Daly in this one. 391 points to his name, 40 above Whitehead, as I say. All Matt Daly needs to do is score just a handful of points, and he can take this away from Andrew Whitehead. What Andrew Whitehead needs is, well, there's 10 cars on the grid, so Matt Daly's guaranteed to score either way, as long as he doesn't retire or anything like that. Andrew Whitehead needs a double race victory with a disaster for Matt Daly as well. So it could obviously be settled towards the end of race 1. We'll just have to see how things shape up. But it is not settled yet. Knief sits in third, just 291 points to his name. And that is just over 40 ahead of Miles Davis in P4. Reeling him in has been Miles Davis, reeling in Colin Knief in this season because of his consistency in attendance and also his progression that he's made in terms of his on-track performance as well, as I mentioned earlier on. Alright, the start of the broadcast has put in some really impressive performances. It has been a joy to watch from the comms box. I'm sure all of you watching along at home agree as well. So 90 seconds left on the clock. Matt Daly brings it in to end this fast. No, he doesn't. No, yeah, I'm getting far ahead of myself. He's actually just gone 35.4 through that first sector, but has actually invalidated this lap. So he's just going to have to treat this as a bit of a learning lap, treat this as a way to get the tyres absolutely perfect into the window, and maybe scrub off a bit of fuel of the car, if at all possible, because this first sector has been invalidated. It will not count for his qualifying run. He will not be able to post a time after this attempt. 60 seconds left to go then. Jack Hodson has also been in. Is currently not out on track, is getting geared up and ready to go for race 1, but is in 10th on according to the timing board. No, I'm completely wrong again. He's technically, whereabouts is he? He's about 5th or 6th. There we go. In fact, make that 5th for Jack Hodson. So that's a nice attempt there. Look forward to see what he can do in the racing as well. And I also hear a rumour, she might even be watching along this evening, that Jack is coaxing the return of Rosie Hodson as well. So hopefully we can see Rosie back on the grid for next season as well. Hope the Mito's going well, by the way, Rosie. I'll do my duty as Mito registrar to ask how's the car going. I know you had a few issues with it a while back now, so hopefully they're all resolved and you're enjoying it and getting ready for the summer as well. We're actually going to be having a big AGM. Well, not the official AGM, I don't think. Maybe it is. I don't know. I've clearly not been involved in the running of sections and registers for long enough. We are going to be having a big meeting between all of the lead of the varying groups as the checkered flag waves and the time hits 0 to get a feel for what AROC is going to look like in 2026 and the time to bang heads together and come with new ideas. And we do want your input as well, so if you're a sim racing enthusiast and you're involved in sim racing with the club, do get any type of queries you might have to, well, by all means myself as well, but primarily Andrew Whitehead. And if you're a Mito owner and you'd like to shout at me for the lack of track day last year, and maybe this one as well, apologies, but do fire any question at me. I've got some big developments on that front and hoping to get some really cool and unique events for our register coming up. But less about that and more about the end of this qualifying session. Alan Matthews brings it in with a 2-minute 10.5, so some nice progression late on there to go third as it stands on the grid. Whitehead's going to be coming across the line next. It's a nice improvement through the middle sector, a 2-minute 10.3 to beat with just one straight to negotiate. Can he get closer to Knief? He can, but it's not close enough. It's a 2-minute 10.1, so still 7 cents advantage for the black and orange car out in front there. That's really impressive stuff, but Whitehead's still doing a good enough job as it stands to try and put on a fight for this championship. John Cole's going to be next across the line, 2-minute 11.4 to beat, and that remains 2-minute 11.4 for John there. Knief's going to be next across the line, by the way. Daly is still out on track as well, but just in front is the driver heading through Club now. No improvements to be found through the first 2 sectors. He doesn't really need to push on. He's looking very comfortable indeed with a 2-minute 9.4 there. He is going to finish the lap at least, head through the final corner. The predicted's looking good as it comes across line. He does make a huge improvement, loses out for the first 2 sectors this time around, but a purple sector 3, a blistering performance there, finds a few hundredths of a second. Matt Daly does get a fast lap in the end, but it's in the 2-minute 10s, not quite where he would have wanted to have been, I suspect. It's a top 5 at least for the championship leader heading into round 1. That's all of our drivers across the line and ready to go racing in just a moment. Paul Millman's out on track as well, but I believe he's going to be classified in P9 overall, and that does bring an end to this qualifying session. So it is going to be a Knief Whitehead front row Matt Daly not too far behind, all things considered. He's only going to be sat right behind Andrew Whitehead, his nearest rival in the championship, as we head into Abbey to start the racing. That brings an end to qualifying then. We'll catch you in a few minutes as we get ready for race 1. Welcome to the grid, ladies and gentlemen, here at Silverstone, ready to go for race one. Not long until we are lights out. Just a quick reminder of what the grid is shaping up to be. It's Knief and Whitehead on the first row, followed by Daly and Matthews on row 2. Miles Davis and Jack Hodson complete the third row. And then it's going to be John Cole, Andy Webb on the fourth. Rounding out your grid, then it'll be Paul Millman and Steve Knight for our 10-car challenge here for race one at Silverstone. 12 seconds to go now. The revs already rising as drivers try to get that clutch bite point absolutely nailed. In fact, we have already got 6 red lights on the gantry. What a quick start sequence we're going to have this evening. We are away and ready to go. Wheel spin off the line for Colin Knief. Whitehead's got a good start, as has Alan Matthews, clawing right up alongside Matt Daly as we head into Abbey. Knief defends the inside line there, leads us through the first couple of corners with a pretty comfortable margin, all things considered. Matthews in fourth at the moment, has a look down the inside on Daly, but might be under threat from Miles Davis if he's not careful. Knief, in fact, make that John Cole, heads up into P5 very briefly, is alongside Miles Davis. Matt Daly's up into second, meanwhile Whitehead having issues running through Village, and here we go, on to the Wellington straight then. Whitehead puts pressure on Matt Daly, right in that slipstream, that big rear wing doing all the work on Matt Daly's car to allow Andrew Whitehead to close up. Has to go around the outside if he wants to try and make the move stick. That is a nice switchback though for the red and white liveried car, who goes down the inside, maintains that side-by-side action as we head on through Luffield. This brings Alan Matthews into play as well, who's up in fourth, but is fancying his chances at a podium here. This is great news if you are Colin Knief, by the way, because he extends that gap out in front now. Already it stands at over a second on the exit of Woodcote. That's fantastic news for the driver, who is hoping, I'm sure, to build some momentum heading into next season. He's looking very calm, very composed, just needs to settle into a rhythm, find some decent pace, look after his tyres, and it's going to be 2 easy victories. I'm making that much more simple than I'm sure it is, as Andrew Whitehead, the back end kicks out. He does very well to catch it. Has he caught it? He's just about caught it. That's the most Formula drifting action I've seen from a front-wheel drive chassis in a long time. Somehow he remains in P3. He's ahead of Miles Davis, has lost a huge amount of momentum though, so might be a sitting duck. Heading down the hanger straight into Stowe we go. Matt Daly then breaks away from his championship rival in this one, as just behind it's going to be Jack Hodson versus John Cole. Hodson goes for the outside around Stowe. Cole goes down the inside and maintains the position in the end, but that was a nice attempt from the white liveried car there to do the old late braking manoeuvre around Stowe. It's a brave one, but if you can make it work, keep the speed up and stay within track limits, which is often something we forget, that is going to be a nice overtake there. Another attempt, I am sure, will be available to him later on into the race. That's your first lap then completed. What a lap it was if you are Colin Knief. I mean, it was great to watch along as well, but Colin Knief is back on form, back racing with us as if he never left, so I'm sure we'll be seeing plenty more of him heading into 2026 as well. Let's see what else we can see further down the order then. Paul Millman is under pressure from Andy Webb. Andy Webb, I don't think, had the most ideal start to this race. I think that is fair to say, looking at his lap time from lap 1. But I'm sure he will be working his way up through the pack as he goes through this race. 25 minutes here at Silverstone. It's not the shortest race in the world, but it's also not the longest, so it does give plenty of opportunity for drivers to have a bit of a battle and settle into a bit of a stint, but also it's not going to completely drop off in terms of driver fatigue, in terms of tyre life as well. Andy Webb has a nice run around the outside of Luffield there. He's going to have a bit of a drag race now into Woodcote, but might lose out on that one, in fact, because he has to hang it around the outside. He gets the car in front and completes the move. There we go, that's Andy Webb up into 7th on his recovery charge. Let's go to the back end, the front end of the pack, if you will, where Colin Knief still leads us by just over 1 second. And again, just doesn't look particularly under any stress at the moment, shall we say. Head through Magnus Beckett, 1.2 seconds of the lead. That's pretty much identical to what it was when we looked at him last out on track on lap 1, but he is under threat now. He's just posted a purple sector 2. I mean, we're going to see the purple sectors flying in the next couple of laps as drivers finally get up to race pace. But Matt Daly is closing in ever so slightly based on what mini sector of the lap that we are in. He certainly caught up in sector 1, lost out ever so slightly in sector 2. In fact, lost out, it was a net loss over sector 2 rather, but might be clawing it back in rather as we head through that final run through Club now. 20 minutes left on the clock already. It is a very long lap here at Silverstone. as I alluded to earlier on, and it did top 4 covered by 5 seconds, make that 5.5 seconds. I think Miles Davis had a slightly iffy run out of club there because John Cole is reeling him in, it looks like, as we head through Abbey now. Into Sector 1 we go again. We did see in the GTA 1750s the loop, village loop and entries, particularly the loop part of that trio of corners, was a bit of a pain point for a number of drivers, especially as we got later into the stints. Drivers will find themselves getting near to the curbs, maybe going into the grass and being upset, and luckily being able to catch it. And I say luckily because, as we know, the GTA did have a bit of a, and it feels weird to say past tense, did have a bit of a tendency to find itself up on 2 wheels. We didn't have any rollovers until after the event when drivers were finishing off the cars, shall we say. But we did have a few close calls. And speaking of close calls there, Jack Hodson has a close call with a wall. It's able to get back on track and continue on, but has lost a position and a substantial amount of time as well. Can continue on, but is back down in P7. In fact, Andy Webb goes for a bit of evading action there as we run through Woodcote. I'm not sure if he needed to, but he did run a little bit wide at least. So he's back underway, is in P7 at the moment, though, trying to push past Jack Hodson in just a moment. Back into the top 5, then here is John Cole, just running through Cops. That obviously, I've mentioned it so many times in the past, but now most famous for, I think, at least in the minds of younger F1 viewers, most famous for that instance in 2021 between 2 drivers who I am sure you know. We haven't seen any, in fact, I might be wrong in my AROC Racing League's history there. I don't quite remember any big collisions or big moments there in our running, but hopefully we don't change that record this evening if that is the case. If there are any AROC Racing League's historians watching along, feel free to correct me on that one. Before I start making any more erroneous claims, let's look at the front end of the action once again. Colin Knief is being very slowly reeled in by Matt Daly. Knief is flying along through Sector 1, much like we saw in qualifying, in fact. Knief is, in particular sectors, is absolute lightning, really. No one's getting anyone anywhere near him. But that pace doesn't get maintained throughout the rest of the lap. Now, I imagine a big part of that is just, quite frankly, tyre temperature. The carcass of the tyre here at Silverstone builds up so much heat because so much energy is going through the tyre that it's going to be alive for Sector 1, say, as Knief's was on the previous lap with a purple Sector 1, and then the time lost through 2 and 3. The tyre's going to gain all that temperature, all that energy through Sector 1, and then you're going to spend the next couple of sectors basically cooling it down the straights and having a very hot inner core of the tyre and just waiting for it to come back to you, as it will do on the next lap. That's what I think we saw a lot of in qualifying, and that might be what we're seeing in the racing there. That's my tinfoil engineer's hat, which is probably very leaky and completely wrong and ill-fitting. But Matt Daly on that previous lap just looked a little bit more consistent. No purple sectors, but just a personal best for each one. Just nice improvements and trying to reel him in. Now, while I've been chatting about that, Knief has in fact ever so slightly expanded that gap to now around about 1.4 seconds as we head through Cops. And these two, I should add, despite the little bit of a battle that's going on, it's not a major, elbows out side by side, trading paint squabble. It's just a nice battle that could be brewing. They're still maintaining some good pace here. They are not phased at all, not being reeled in by the likes of Whitehead or Davis. This is not ideal if you are Andrew Whitehead. As it stands, pretty much this brings an end to his championship hopes. In fact, it does bring an end to his championship hopes, which would be a terrible shame because he's put in an almighty effort, has Andrew Whitehead so far this season. Has got very close in terms of points. I think it just comes down to these championships. In fact, I think the GTA one did as well. Just pretty much came down to real-life commitments and who was available at certain races. If everyone was in attendance for every single round, and obviously it's quite frankly mostly impossible, we have even closer runs in the championship standings. So looking forward to seeing what we have next year as well. As I said in qualifying, do make sure to get signed up. Do make sure to jump in on the action if you haven't done so already. And if you're a little bit worried, oh, I'm not going to be quite here at the top end of things, well, as I say, we're doing certain things behind the scenes to balance things out a little bit, but also you don't have to be going right for the race wins. We're going to do your best to make sure that you have some racing to do anyway, as we are seeing further down the order. Alan Matthews, who obviously was a bit of a favourite, a bit of a hopeful at the start of this one, has had some issues and is currently down in P8, finds his way past Paul Millman and is able to continue on. But even if you're thinking, you know what, I'm not going to be able to fight for podiums, do get involved anyway. You will learn, you will progress, as so many of our competitors have. They weren't, I'm sure they won't mind me saying this, some of them were very new to the world of sim racing, shall we say. But now the progression that they've made, they can get the car around the lap and keep it pointed on all pointed in the right direction on all 4 tyres, which is not something that I'm often capable of doing. So they're doing very well indeed. So do get involved if you haven't already. Steve Knight is lapping in P10 at the moment, so another point to add to his tally. He's actually currently in 12th in the championship. Won't be able to get quite so close to the likes of Jack Hodson, but it's still not a bad championship standings position at all things considered. Finishes ahead of the likes of Will Inglis, Guy Swarbrick, Mike Hilton, Andy Craig and Alex Smith in this one. So a decent championship score overall there for Paul Millman and Steve Knight there. Paul Millman currently in 10th. That's why he was in my mind at that particular moment. But 15 minutes left to go in this race already. It is flying past. And as I suspected, I think we're going to be starting to trade sectors here or there as John Cole finds a way past Miles Davis, because Miles Davis has had a big off. We can't even see him on your screens, folks. He is on track somewhere. There he is. He's back out on track, now heading into Maggots, actually. But has lost a lot of time, had a bit of a spin there, and has tumbled down the order. What a shame for a driver who has impressed so much this season. Just a little bit of commentator's curse there, although not quite as bad as we have seen at some other events so far this season. I believe it was Snetterton was probably Thruxton was probably my worst bit of commentator's curse, if I remember correctly. Either way, Miles, I apologise. Hopefully, we'll see a few more points for you in at least, if not this race, the reverse grid race coming up after race 1 this evening. But back to the front end of the action. These two drivers, Matt Daly, Colin Caniff, are the ones in the 209s when they can get those really fast laps in. They are trading purple sectors at the moment. 1.5 seconds has been a very consistent gap between these two, and I think it's going to come down to who has the most tyre life later on in the stint, if we don't see any errors creeping in later on. And particularly in the other series that I've been commentating for in the world of sim racing, the Club 100 iRacing League, it seems to be a thing for any commentary event that I am currently presiding over, so to speak, is that if everything looks settled for 20 out of the 25 minutes, those last 2 minutes are going to be utterly action-packed, and I'm going to have no voice by the end of it, because all carnage just seems to ensue on that final lap. So, sorry drivers, if that is the case, it is my fault. And in fact, in this series, in the AROC Racing Leagues, we have had plenty of fantastic last lap battles, sometimes for first place as well. So let's see if Matt Daly can close up on Colin Caniff as we approach the halfway marker in this race. Here we go there, another lap tumbles on by. 1 second is now the margin between our leading two drivers. I can sense a battle brewing once again. 11.5 minutes left on the clock. The gap is shrinking. Both drivers are still flying along and setting personal best laps. I'm going to delve into my usual of talking about the times improving, where we are still going to have some life left in the tyres. I do suspect they could be a bit like a cliff edge, the tyres here at Silverstone this evening. The temperature is going to take quite a hammering on those tyres, and plenty of high speeds. I wouldn't be too shocked if we start to see these front-wheel drive cars really exercising that front axle later on into the race. But for now, things are looking good, and as the fuel tank gets lighter, we are going to see some really impressive times coming in. As I mentioned in the GTA round last week, obviously these cars are going to be relatively thirsty when they're on wide open throttle, and here at Silverstone it demands quite a lot of wide open throttle. Maybe a tiny bit less in the Giulietta than the GTA 1750, just because it's a slightly more capable car overall. But the high-speed nature of the track does mean you've got to put a hell of a lot of fuel in the tank to get the car to complete 25 minutes, and you're going to burn through a lot of that on a lap-by-lap basis, so the more laps you do, quite a lot of weight does begin to drop out of the car. As we take a rear look at the yellow liveried car, a bit of oversteer creeping in, under braking for the Giulietta WTCR of Matt Daly, and that is going to be a familiar feeling for any Mito Quadrifoglio owner there. As I have mentioned multiple times, it's a nice bit of corner entry rotation that you can get from those little Mitos, which is surprising for a front-wheel drive road car where you can't turn the stability control off in. They're very eager under brakes to just rotate nicely. Once you kind of tame that, you can actually use it to your benefit, because otherwise I have found that car does like to understeer just a little bit, but you can kind of dial a lot of that out by just being a bit brave on the brake pedal. Something I'd test out and use maybe on track and not immediately try and do it on the road, but certainly a bit of a technique to aim for there. Don't know if Matt was trying to aim for that, and will probably correct me. He's a much faster driver than myself, as I learned at National Alpha Day, when I was very fortunate to be passenger in his fantastic little Sud Shop Alpha Sud race car. Still haven't forgotten about it. Still going to bang on about it because it was hilarious fun. Obviously, do head there for all the Sud-related sporty bits and all sorts for Suds, really. 9 minutes left on the clock, and there's 7/10 of a second between Knief and Daly. So Daly slowly reeling Knief in. With less than 10 minutes to go, though, it is certainly a case of the pressure beginning to mount now. Every single corner means that the laps are fading away, that the racing is drawing closer to a close in this, the penultimate race of the season. So Matt Daly's really going to have to start to think about where his rival might be losing time in comparison to him, where he might be vulnerable, where he can set up the attack to try and get the race lead in this one. Has lost some time on the exit of Copse, so he's going to have to wait for another opportunity, I suspect, after Maggott and Beckett. We have seen Matt Daly was certainly no stranger to being confident in the car, shall we say, on that run through Stowe, through Vale and into Club. So be eager to see if he's able to replicate that here at the final round in the Giuliettas. But if there's one thing we learned from qualifying, is that Colin Knief is certainly capable of a blistering sector here or there. So as we saw from that final run in qualifying, very late on in fact, that sector 3 made all the difference. So Knief, I'm sure, no stranger to getting that car around the Vale and Club complex very quickly indeed. 7.5 minutes and there or thereabouts left on the clock. Let's have a look at what else is going on through the pack. Jack Hodson and Andy Webb standing at around about half a second of a gap between themselves, and then just behind that is Alan Matthews as well. Let's see what else we can see. These two seem to be our closest drivers outside of the top two on track at the moment. In fact, Webb is closing up on Jack Hodson. We might be staying tuned to this one, folks, as they get ready to start the next lap of the race. It's interesting, I've just come off the back of commentating the Club 100 series at Road Atlanta in GT3s. That's an 80-second lap at Road Atlanta, as Webb's having a look down the inside into Abbey, thinks better of it, not a lot close enough yet to set up that move, but we do know it is coming. As I say, I was at Road Atlanta last night for some GT3 action. That was a 40-minute race, so that was about 33 laps. So it was a bit of a culture shock for me, at least, to immediately go from seeing a 33-lap race to 8 laps, and we're already winding this one to a close now. Not been wall-to-wall explosive action, but there has been a lot of battles brewing. Nothing to be done just yet, but if nothing happens in this one, don't worry, folks. The reverse grid race is going to be coming up in a few minutes. That is when the top 7 from this order have their starting positions completely flipped. So the driver finishing P7 ends up starting on pole for race 2, and it does mean that the front runners from race 1 have a lot of work to do, especially in the early phases of that race. So do stay tuned for that one, folks. I'm sure you're all familiar with it by now. 6 minutes left on the clock, though, in this mid-pack battle, which is looking as close, if not closer, in fact, than the front-end action that we've been enjoying for the past few laps here at Silverstone. And this is just another quick hello to everyone watching along this evening. As I mentioned earlier on, do get any comments about the broadcast. Could even be about, I don't know, what your favourite type of cheese is, or what's your what's the track that you're most looking forward to next year? That's probably more relevant than talking about cheese, isn't it? That sounds very Walton Grumby. We're ignoring that. Andy Webb's had a bit of an issue. That is perhaps the weirdest transition I've ever done in the virtual comms box here. Out of Chapel Curve, Andy Webb does have some issues, so loses out on that fight that we were going to have between himself and Jack Hodson. Tumbles back down to 7th. It just hasn't quite been a race to remember so far, or a weekend to remember so far for Andy Webb. Hopefully he has better fortunes in the reverse grid action, because as I mentioned just a moment ago, he's currently in P7. He'll be on pole for race 1. And actually, in our last bit of reverse grid action in the GTA 1750s, Andy had a great little go of things from the reverse grid pole, which was a similar position to what he was into last week, as I say, and actually held on to that race lead for quite a while in race 2. So hopefully we can replicate that, and maybe even replicate it for 25 minutes. That would be exciting, wouldn't it? But less than 5 minutes to go here now, so as I say, do get in touch with any comments that you have about the broadcast so far. Do let us know what your highlight of this season's been. What are you looking forward to most next season as well? What type of car are you looking forward to? What track are you looking forward to? What Italian venue are you looking forward to us visiting? Of course, very shortly we will be kicking off proceedings for 2026 in Franciacorta. Another karting venue, actually, at some point I'll be hoping to visit in my antics in the world of real-life commentary. So I'm looking forward to that one. But 4 minutes left on the clock, 9 laps under our belts so far. Knief is actually heading around towards Maggotts Beckett on that 9th lap, so we'll be getting ready to kick things off for our first double-digit lap in around about 50 or so seconds, and these two have been just pretty much unparalleled, haven't they? It must be said. As I mentioned, it hasn't been wall-to-wall action, but they've just been nice and consistent at the front end of the pack, and barreling along quite nicely. Now, this is not a slight against Andrew Whitehead at all. He's a very capable, very fast driver, and has been putting in some fantastic times. You know, his best is a low 2:10, but hasn't quite been there with the likes of Daly and Knief. So with this, we pretty much do settle the championship for this one, and it will go the way, if the results stay the same, heading into race 2 of Matt Daly. And what an impressive run it has been for Matt Daly this season. But Whitehead doing an impeccable job. Runner-up, as he has been in the GTA standings as well. He has been the constant challenge to Matt Daly in all of this. Has brought us some fantastic fights at various rounds. I must say, it has been a bit of a roller coaster of emotions, but he is at least going to bring it home with a good finish overall in the standings. 3 minutes left on the clock then. Knief still leads us, hasn't cracked under the pressure from Matt Daly just yet, and this is another one of those race meetings where, as I say, hasn't been wall-to-wall action, but it has been impressive to watch nonetheless, because these two drivers have been challenging each other. Challenging each other for what will be 25 minutes straight. And they just haven't let up. They haven't really put a single foot wrong. They've been relentless and have kept each other on their respective toes. So very impressive to see. Daly does close up as we head through Luffield, is within 1 second, make that 8/10 in fact, with just 2 minutes left on the clock. Could this be Daly's chance? It is a strategy that we have seen in the past. It's keep as much of the tyres in reserve as possible. There's no point battling for 15 minutes in the race if you can't find a way past with a very slight pace advantage. You might as well back off a little bit, keep the tyres fresh, have a massive pace advantage in the very last moments. It's a brave play, but it's one that we have seen work in the past. So let's see if that is going to be the case in this penultimate race of the season, as I say. So 1 second is the margin between the two. There's even closer running between the likes of Jack Cotton and Alan Matthews as they head down towards Cop, so we're going to keep one eye on this as we get closer to the penultimate lap of this race. There we go, then we see Alan Matthews taking a slightly wide run through Stowe. They did get achingly close, but nothing he can do from there. Unfortunately, we head through Club then. 45 seconds left on the clock, which means that as Knief and Daly start their next lap, this will be the penultimate lap of this penultimate race of the season. But in the midfield is where we are seeing a bit of action going on here. A second and a half in this gap between P1 and P2. But there we can see in the background, in fact, Webb potentially losing out to Miles Davis, who also hasn't had an ideal race this time out. Hodson on the defence so from Alan Matthews. Half a second is the margin in this penultimate lap, as I say. But so far able to hang on to it. Now, who's going to get the better run through the loop? You've got to keep the momentum up quite nicely through Aintree before you head onto the Wellington straight. And there is he dipping into the grass is Matthews in the green and white liveried car. We head back onto the Wellington straight now, and he can remain in the slipstream if he so chooses to. But already he's trying to set the car up for a potential run down the inside, I think. But it's going to be way too far back to do anything from there just yet. We will wait for the indicator that the leader is in fact on the final lap. There's a big gap between the two. There's a smaller gap between Matthews and Hodson there. Matthew very nearly ends up in the rear bumper of Jack Hodson there as we head through Luffield. Does pick it up quite nicely. No harm, no foul overall, but it is getting rather frenetic between these two as there we go. Oh dear, I think there's been some serious server issues. Hopefully this isn't just on my end and the stream can still stay live. I think this could be on my end in fact, so apologies if that is the case. We will get things resumed very shortly indeed. And just a quick message, folks, to say we are experiencing some technical difficulties at the moment, so a big apologies for that one. Usually, they're all my fault, but I can confirm they're not this evening. They're actually on the server side, which is a terrible shame. The servers have been completely reliable for seasons now, just absolute seasons. In the penultimate race, they have a little bit of a hiccup. Drivers have been advised to continue racing. They are slightly separated out, and they're not effectively racing against each other, but their races are still continuing on. So what we're hoping to do is tell the drivers to get to the end of their races, just bumble along, complete their laps, and we'll see what we can do in terms of getting a final race time on. That might mean that we either include the race 1 results or maybe we exclude them. Either way, we're going to do our best to get the server up in good time and get started for race 2 for what should be the final race of the season. So do bear with us for a few minutes. We're back in just a moment. Hello there, folks. I'm pleased to report, and actually somewhat surprised, we're back. Apologies for that very long and slightly confusing intermission. The server had a bit of a whoopsie. Race 2 is the race that I believe we're now on the grid for. Thank you to everyone in the background who I've just been chatting to. Thank you to the likes of Andrew Bram in the background, who puts a lot of the server setup in, who has, by the looks of things, got us into the second race session. I'm going to broadcast this as the second race session. I can see a prompt on my screen to vote yes or no. I'm not in the Discord anymore, so I don't quite know what's going on. I'm not going to vote on that just in case I mess anything up. Not too sure what's going to happen. We might go a bit quiet on the broadcast, but I am at least going to give you some racing going on. So we do have a race start here. Oh dear, Colin. Oh, it's all got a bit messy here, folks, as we are at least heading around the circuit in some Giuliettas. You might have to give me just a moment, folks. I'm going to go a little bit quiet. You might actually hear some of the drivers. You might hear a bit of an impromptu appearance from the voices of the drivers here. But I think, you know what? Scratch that. I think we're just going to go racing. I'm going to try and do a bit of digging in the background, see what's going on, and get back to you. But for now, without Reeve, which might even be beneficial, enjoy some Giuliettas going around the track. Hello, folks. Hello. I am back. Fear not. We are going to get some more Racing Leagues action. This is race 2 for this session. Not too sure. Going to be quite frank, quite brutally honest. Don't know whether the race 1 results are even going to be considered to be taking place anymore. I'm not sure if we're going to count back for the past couple of laps. That's all up in the air. I don't think it's going to change the wider championship kind of standings anyway. So let's just enjoy race 2 as a bit of a fun kind of parade, victory end lap, if you will, to this season's running. What a diminuendo, though. I mean, the servers have been bulletproof reliable. As I say, big thank you to the likes of Andrew Brammer and everyone who puts in all the work behind the scenes to make all of this happen. It's Andrew who's actually been hot on the case, getting things back up and running once more, and has actually said it looks to be just not even an issue with the server, so to say. It looks to be something to do with an internet exchange somewhere. It had a bit of an oopsie because seems to be that lots of European stuff is currently having a bit of a problem, which is very interesting for me as I work in IT on my 9 to 5, so I'm sure I'm going to have a really fun time tomorrow. But 20 minutes left on the clock in this race 2. It's not a reverse grid race then in the end, after now a bit of false advertising clearly. This is just the random grid race after this one. Andrew Whitehead currently leads us, John Cole's in P2. Andrew Whitehead having a big off though right at the start of the lap, heading into the village, is able to get it back out on track but loses out to John Cole though. John Cole, a driver who has been a joy to see back out on track, but I don't think quite expected to be leading the running immediately off the block, so well done to him. As I say, the order is completely jumbled, so even if it is counted as a championship round, I'm sure it is one thing to bear in mind that drivers obviously have done very well and maybe won't have been rewarded for their progress in race 1 heading into race 2, so do bear that in mind. But everyone's very understanding, everyone knows that, you know what, these things do happen from time to time. You know, in the world of real life racing, you have weather events, you have circuit organisation quandaries, you have all sorts of uncontrollable circumstances. We're quite lucky in the world of sim racing, most of those are eliminated, but sometimes circumstances do get the better of us. But as I say, we've mostly had an incredibly reliable past few years, which actually echoes my experience with Alfa Romeos in general. Maybe it was the BMW this evening that has been running the servers, because that thing is the bane of my life. Anyway, 19 minutes left on the clock in this one. John Cole leads us from Whitehead. That's your picture at the front end of the pack. And speaking of picture, I am going to briefly glance just to see. I mean, like clockwork, I instinctively went to go look at the championship picture after race 1. I can confirm, though, the results are not being counted from race 1. Race 1 never happened. What that does mean is that it's settled. Matt Daly is your champion for 2025/6 25H2. Matt Daly is your champion in the end there. I believe Alan Matthews and Matt Daly are having a bit of a squabble at the moment, actually. We'll have a look at them as they head round club and onto the start-finish straight. Whitehead, meanwhile, gets in front of John Cole because John Cole's had to dive into the pits. Not sure why that is. Unfortunately, he brings an end to his race when it was looking rather bright, it must be said. That promotes Daly into P2, Alan Matthews into P3, and John Cole's had an issue. He's had to retire from the session. What a terrible shame to see John dropping out from such a strong position. Hopefully we'll see more of him heading into next season's running. But 3 seconds is the gap between Daly and Whitehead. I'm sure that's a gap that Whitehead is focusing on, that's a gap that Daly's focusing on, but Matthews focusing on something very different indeed. He's fancying his chances at taking P2 in this one. Isn't able to do so just yet. It's in the slipstream of Daly's yellow liveried car. We'll see what he can do as we head down towards Brooklands. He goes very close, in fact goes deep into the corner late on the brakes. That does force him to wash a little wide, a little deep into the corner. He does well to keep it pointed the right direction and on the tarmac though, so has lost a little bit of time that could have been much worse in what is now effectively our non-championship fun parade lap to round out the proceedings. I'm actually looking, and yet in the standings, apart from Paul Millman, who will jump ahead of Nathan Birch in this one, no one else can move in the standings. The standings are as follows. Matt Daly is your champion this season with 391 points to his name. Whitehead 351, Knief 291 in third, Miles Davis 249 in fourth. Alan Matthews just behind actually can potentially usurp Miles Davis in the standings after this one. Again, this weekend might not even be counted as a championship round, but very little changes will happen even if it is. Andy Webb, 162 points to his name, 6th in the standings. Then we have Greg Young, 131 in 7th. John Cole, 121 in 8th. Nathan Birch on 95, just ahead of Paul Millman for now. But as I say, as it stands, Paul Millman will jump into 9th into the standings. Hodson's on 74 points in 11th. Steve Knight's in 67, sorry, on 12th. On 12th place, no, in 12th place with 67 points. Get your words out correctly. Reeve, as Colin Knief's in 6th and sets a purple sector. Will Inglis is in 13th with 50 points. Guy Swarbrick's in 14th with 24. Hilton, 18 points to his name, 15th. Andy Craig is 16th in the standings with 10 points to his name, and then Alex Smith with 2 in 17th overall. 15 minutes left to go in this race, and as I say, the standings might not even be considered from this round, but they certainly won't change that much even if they are. So, as I say, what a shame the things go this way, but other than that, has been a thoroughly enjoyable season. And as I say, I did have to dive into the paddock chat there. Drivers all taking it in good spirits, it must be said. So, as ever, drivers, thank you for your attitude to the racing this season. It has been, as ever, as it has been for our multiple seasons, a real joy to be part of the community, as Knief and Hodson are having some interesting goings about in this one. And heading into Brooklands, they are into the left-hander we go. 15 minutes left on the clock. Knief's worked his way up into 5th position on the road, and Daly is starting to break away from Alan Matthews now, focusing on Whitehead just in front. Sorry to get all boring, nerdy and technical with you while some racing is going on, but I've just had a look at good old down detector, and yeah, IT is going to be fun tomorrow in the office for myself, because Cloudflare looks to be the service provider having an issue. Obviously, Cloudflare, for those of you who might be in the know, might be a bit techie like myself, domain name system provider, DNS provider, appears to be having massive outages at the moment, which would explain why random services here or there are having some problems, including ourselves. What a shame. But as I say, at least the racing is back underway now, and Matt Daly is flying along. We've stayed on board with him for a reason. He's just gone purple sector 1, purple sector 3, and a fairly decent sector 2 as well. He's broken away from Matthews and is closing in on Whitehead as we approach near half race distance in this one. Here we get a great shot actually of Matt Daly reeling in Andrew Whitehead. That aerial view just gives an indication as to what the margins are looking like through Maggotts Beckett, and you can see 1.8 seconds is now that margin. The rest of the pack has actually done a fairly good job of settling out into a bit of a rhythm, bit of clear space on the track to occupy from each other, which is, I say, impressive given that. Very impressive, given that the slightly frenetic grid order in this one, shall we say. Two seconds now is now your gap between Whitehead and Daly. So actually, Whitehead doing a fairly decent job through sector 3 there of maintaining a good pace, keeping that advantage with 11.5 minutes left on the clock. Less than 10 minutes to go in this one then, and here we go. The battle for the lead is on. Whitehead leads us through Aintree and on to the Wellington Straight. Daly 0.3 of a second behind now. And we can see Paul Millman and Hodson having, we saw this ding-dong battle between the trio beginning to shape up, and it's now very much in full swing. Millman leads Davis just behind his Hodson as well. They're heading through the village, through the loop and into Aintree themselves. And there we can see Miles trying to weigh on through, having a look around the outside, but can't find a way to make the move stick just yet. Has a tighter run and I think has the momentum as we run through Aintree and onto the Wellington Straight. Certainly going to get a little bit of slipstream at least as we navigate our way down towards Brooklands in just a moment. We do go side by side. Later on the brakes goes Miles Davis, and that is P6 for the young driver there. And there we go, that is going to be Jack Hodson going a little bit deep into the corner, but still staying on the right side of the curbs there. At least it's Miles Davis up into 6th. And at the front end of the pack, we are now seeing Daly closing in on Andrew White as we navigate Maggott and Beckett. Make that 0.2 of a second, never mind 0.4 of a second. The run through Chapel and onto the Hanger Straight is going to be the important one now here, folks. Under the bridge we go and down towards Stowe. The big right-hander up next with plenty of high speed to carry on through there. A tall order, as I say, for a front-wheel drive based car. In fact, not even front-wheel drive, it's just front-wheel drive. Through the Stowe we go, through Vale and down towards Club. And there we can see Daly takes an inside line there. Whitehead goes slightly deeper into the corner, but that does give him the inside for the right-hander that comes up next. But this is looking very close now, isn't it, folks? Just over a car length between these two drivers, maybe 2 car lengths at most before we head into Abbey, the right-hander. 7 minutes left on your clocks now. Left on the clocks in this session. Server issues putting a bit of a stopper, but we certainly didn't give up. I'm pleased to report we are back for one last bit of racing. This is going to be the final few laps of this season, don't forget. And here we go, through we go down towards Aintree in just a moment. Having a look around the outside and carrying plenty of speed is Matt Daly before we head on to the start-finish straight. You can see just how much more speed he's carrying. He's having to go deeper on corner exit there. Hasn't compromised him all that much, so he's going to go pretty much side by side. Has an advantage, potentially. Has to go down the inside, but well defended by Andrew Whitehead. He keeps hold of it and knows that if he parks his Giulietta in just the right place, there's going to be nowhere for Daly to find a way on through. That has very much been the case as we navigate the Luffield and Woodcote complex now. Matthews is hanging on in P3, just having a nice comfortable race out in P3 as he often does, the Lone Ranger in P3. And then it's going to be Colin Knief currently running along in 4th, setting purple sectors as he heads down towards one of the final few laps in this one. 6 minutes left on the clock, going to be about 13 laps in the race overall. And on for a bit of a fly at the moment is Knief. Purple through Sector 1 has the fastest lap of the race overall, despite our 2 leaders controlling things so well so far in this race. Actually, in fact, I think Knief's still going to go faster still because that Delta's looking very impressive. I don't think the predicted time's quite right there, just based off the speed that is shown so far. But let's have a look at the front end of the pack once again, because heading down towards Stowe, Daly has the inside here. Whitehead might be able to claw onto things, hanging it around the outside, and is able to do so, in fact, by just carrying that extra speed that is often afforded to you by all that space you do have running through Stowe. As we saw Matthews exploring some of that space there. Whitehead is able to maintain the race lead here. This isn't going to be for a championship in the end, of course, because it is all settled between these two. Daly is your champion for 2025 H2, but I am sure that Whitehead at least wants to try and finish the season in style, and these two certainly are doing so, despite the best efforts of the World Wide Web. Oh dear, we might be having further issues still. Hang in there, Service. We don't want to give up on this fantastic battling that we've been enjoying here at Silverstone. A season that we started at Silverstone has been bookended by Silverstone, don't forget. Plenty of action at the national layout and plenty to have here at the Grand Prix course as well. The gap expands ever so slightly as they run through the loop and down past Aintree and onto Wellington Straight. But Daly able to close that back up, heading down that straight. The slipstream working to his favour there, and he's a bit too far back to think about a move down the inside, but can at least keep that pressure mounted on Andrew Whitehead as we navigate to the final few laps of not just this race weekend, but the season as well. Here we go then, less than 3 minutes on the clock, 4/10 of a second between these two drivers. Now, Whitehead still controlling things quite nicely. We didn't get to see Whitehead in a leading position in race 1. He certainly had some decent pace, but just wasn't quite there in the end. Knief was a driver who was clinging on to the top step very well indeed in race 1. We did hear in the paddock, I think he's ready for a well-deserved rest. I get the feeling he was saying he's feeling a little bit tired heading into this one, but I am sure he's at least pleased that we're going to get a few laps in before we say goodbye to this season. 4/10 of a second is the gap between these two, and as I say, Whitehead's doing a very impressive job. Maybe he didn't quite have the ultimate leading pace in race 1, but heading into race 2 here, he's got out in front and he's held onto it very well. He's done everything that he needs to do, has not cracked under the pressure from the new champion-elect, Matt Daly, and is going to at least finish the season in style, adding another race victory to his tally overall this season. I'm just looking back at some of the previous records to see what our race victors have looked like, and well, it's really a story of 3 drivers with just 1 intermission. In fact, make that 2 intermissions overall. Matt Daly and Colin Knief were definitely the story of the day early on in the season, as we are seeing Matt Daly involved in the story from this race as well, as we go side by side running down the hanger straight. Having a look around the outside is Daly. We know that move can work, but not giving up quite so easily. Whitehead says, thank you very much, I'll take that back, as we head down the inside there. But it was Daly and Knief who very much controlled things at the first half, at least the first third of the season, with plenty of race victories to their name. Then things shifted slightly weird. Knief not able to visit quite as many events, and Andrew Whitehead certainly started to pick up plenty of race victories. But it was Donington where we saw a great victory from John Cole in the second race of that race evening, and then the other new race victor in the Giulietta series was Kasakun, just a fortnight ago, of course, as Whitehead has a look down the inside heading into towards the loop there to take back the race lead. It was, of course, Miles Davis who took that brilliant race victory in race 1. Hasn't quite been able to replicate that so far this evening, but hopefully continues that momentum heading into next season. The timer about to hit 0. This is the penultimate lap of the season, and Whitehead has managed to fight well for this one, hasn't he? Daly also obviously fighting well. Meanwhile, Knief's in 4th, closing in on Alan Matthews with some really impressive pace. It was a 2-minute 9.5 on that last lap, which is the fastest lap of the racing so far. And the closest drivers out on track are your 2 race leaders, as the timer does indeed hit 0. Daly gets a great run out of Cops there, but Andrew Whitehead doesn't need to work quite as hard on the run down towards Maggots to defend here, because the track gets relatively narrow. So I mean, Silverstone's a massive, ridiculously wide track by British standards at all points, but it does narrow ever so slightly. That's one of the narrower high-speed sections, shall we say, and the track kind of falls toward the left-hand side there. So if you just maintain your line in the race lead, you will find yourself actually on a bit of a defensive drive there. So Whitehead using the track to his advantage there, as we are going to have 2 battles brewing here in the final moments of the season. Whitehead versus Daly, and then Matthews versus Knief as well. The timer hits 0 as we run through Club. Whitehead under no challenge, but Matthews certainly under a challenge as they headed through Stone, down through Vale there. Matthews on the defence, Knief just behind, but for a moment they were side by side, and I think it could come down to a very important run through the final corner, posting very similar lap times, by the way, the 2 race leaders. Matthews on the defence here as we start the next lap. Knief just needs to hold that outside line, and if he does so, he will gain an advantage, and there we go. There is that advantage by just hanging around the outside, keeps the speed higher, and we have a switchback going on. Now this is going to reverse itself once again. Here we go as we approach the right-hander. Just need to hang on the inside as Matthews does do that, and is afforded the left-hand side as we run through the loop and down towards Aintree once again. But in fact, Another bit of a turnaround in fortunes here as we see Knief hanging it down the inside. Through Aintree we go onto the the Wellington straight rather. We're pretty much trading paint, we're banging wheels as Knief doesn't want to give any more than he absolutely needs to. At the front end of the pack there's collisions aplenty as our two race leaders are also quarrelling out. But here we go, Whitehead versus Daly, Knief versus Matthews on the final lap of the final race of the season. What a show this has been. It has been a roller coaster this evening, folks. Don't forget, we verily didn't have a race 2, but now we're afforded a great finish to proceedings. What a way for this championship to end as it has gone on so far this season. Whitehead wins out in that battle for the time being. I don't think the battle for P3 is quite over yet. For now, it does go to Knief in the end, but Matthews is certainly going to fight for it as they run through Maggott and Beckett. Chapel, followed by Hanger, followed by Stowe. Some really pivotal parts of the track coming up next, so just don't think that this racing is over quite so far, folks, because I can tell you for a fact that it is not. We're on the final lap now. Whitehead leads us under pressure from Daly, who is closing in as they navigate Stowe. Knief, meanwhile, under pressure from Matthews, but is a slightly larger delta between those two drivers. We head through Stowe then. For the last time this season, we are going to be completing a race here at Silverstone. As I say, we bookended running for the Juliettas and for the 1750s here at Silverstone. What a season it's been in 25. What a battle it has been to round out this race. In the end, Whitehead navigates the final lap and takes victory. Weaves in celebration to bring an end to this season. Daly brings it home with a very close P2. Knief just about wins out ahead of Alan Matthews in a final lap battle, which has been brewing for quite some time in this race. There we go, that's your top 4 settled then. A bit of a wait, which is really impressive, running from that top 4 for P5 to come home in a few moments' time. I already get the feeling we're going to get some victory donuts, which I'm pleased to report, because for a moment I didn't think we were going to get anything from the end of this race, from the end of this race weekend, from the end of this season as well. And there we go, we get victory drifts from Matt Daly. Difficult to do the donuts in front-wheel drive cars, although a bit of handbrake might help there. Webb brings it home in P5 in the end. Davis classified P6. Paul Millman crosses the line in P7. Hodson just behind in P8, and then a bit of a wait for Steve Knight there as well. It's your 9 finishes from this one. And we've already seen some victory drifts, and I think we're going to get some formation running to end the 2025 H2 running. GTA 1750s departed last week. The Juliettas, a bit of a mainstay of the AROC Racing Leagues over the years, are going to take a bit of a hiatus as we head into next season's running. I'm very much looking forward to that, but I am very keen to remind us just what a season we've had. It's certainly a good season to reflect upon, and I do hope our drivers give us a bit of a good parade in lap, as they seem to be doing so far. Everyone's gone for the Formula Drift strategy so far, it seems, this evening, but a big well done to our drivers so far for this year's running in a new era of AROC Racing Leagues. It's kicked off with this season's running, of course. Things are going to improve further as we head into 2026 as well. So a big thank you to those drivers for putting on such a good show for us, and a big thank you to all of you for watching along at home as well. As I say, do make sure to get involved if you haven't done so already. If you're thinking about it, just do it. Certainly is a good one. I promise, server issues certainly don't happen frequently. This is the first time in years we've had any even slight issue with the running of things, so I do apologise for that, folks, but that is not taking away from what has otherwise been a blockbuster, action-packed race weekend. We have the victory drifts, the victory donuts, to bring an end to this season's running. It has been a delight to commentate on the 2025 H2 running. Don't go anywhere though, folks, because very shortly, and I do mean very shortly, it's not going to be a big break at all, we're going to kick off the 2026 running at Franciacorta. The Giro d'Italia will be kicking off shortly. We've had the British tracks this season, we've got the Italian tracks coming up next. Our drivers navigate into the pits, which just leaves me to say thank you all for watching this season, and I'll see you very shortly for some more AROC Racing Leagues action. Thank you, and a good night.